Here we go. I'm here, you're here, we're all here for the inaugural episode of BFIBs Almanac, a Cardinals baseball podcast. I'm Jared, and we're going to have some fun. We're going to get into a little bit of everything in this show, all about Cardinals baseball. It could be anything from specific player analysis to coaches to strategy to general baseball information. Maybe we talk about war. We might talk about changes in the game, like banning the shift or bringing the DH to the National League, or the use of replay. We might talk about reminisce about the old days, the 82 and 85 and 87 World Series teams, and look at some of those rosters and maybe how the game was played different back then. So week to week, you never know what we're going to talk about. But on this first episode, we're going to get into the state of the Cardinals. So let's look back at the 2018 season and how this team finished, what their record was compared to some of the division rivals. So the Cardinals finished 88-74, good for third place in the division. Milwaukee was 96-67. Chicago was 95-68. They played a one-game playoff for that extra game. So, you're talking 7 or 8 game difference in the standings. That's pretty big when it comes to, ground to make up. Do we think that Milwaukee and Chicago are going to repeat that? That's a pretty good performance, 96 wins. They'll probably fall off a little, but I can't imagine they'll fall off too much. Should we expect the Cardinals to finish at 88, 89, 90, better than that? I think they will be better. We'll get into a little bit about how we get to those numbers, but let's take a look at who has left the team and who they've acquired. Some of the key players. Let me preface that with I don't think any of the key players are gone. So guys like Greg Garcia, Matt Adams, Patrick Wisdom, Carson Kelly, though, we really call him a minor leaguer. Luke Weaver, Matt Bowman, Tyson Ross, Bud Norris. There's more, but those are kind of the big names that contributed quite a bit to this team and are no longer with the team for various reasons, whether they were traded or they were just not picked up. They became free agents. We had other guys that with the same skill set. So those guys are gone. Are they big pieces to the puzzle? Not necessarily. Obviously, Bud Norris did a heck of a lot for the team last year. But they've got a surplus of arms, and there's a chance, I suppose, they could bring him back on an affordable deal. But he kind of ended the season with some injury problems. I don't know if they want to go with that veteran presence or if they want to kind of go younger. I know there was some tension, sort of perceived tension with him and Jordan Hicks. I think that might have just been the media making that more than it was. But those are some of the guys who've left. Some of the players they've acquired, which haven't been very many, but the key piece is Paul Goldschmidt, all-star MVP caliber, Gold Glove caliber, and just an all-around good guy from what they say. The other big piece would be Andrew Miller, power left-handed arm in the bullpen. He's coming off his worst season in a long time. Some of his stats are the worst. Some of them aren't too bad. But for being kind of an elite-level reliever for a few years there, he kind of dropped off in 2018. He was on the DL 3 times, I think, with various injuries, shoulder and knee. But the Cardinals think he's healthy. He thinks he's healthy. They aren't really even talking about the injuries that he had in 2018. So if he's anywhere close to what he used to be, he's going to be a huge upgrade in the pen. And really, there was an article in the Post this week about how even his subpar 2018 season was better in a lot of ways than what the Cardinals bullpen produced, especially from the left side. So he's a huge upgrade. The only other acquisition of note is Drew Robinson, which is a left-handed utility guy they got from the Rangers, I believe, for Patrick Wisdom. Patrick Wisdom was a right-handed hitting third base. He could play some other positions, but mostly third base. A lot of guys like Patrick Wisdom. I liked him, what I had seen. He just looks like a ball player, that prototypical athletic, muscular ball player. Apparently he's played really well in the minor league system. People were surprised he didn't get more of a chance with the Cardinals. I think part of it was just the position that he played and the guys ahead of him. I think he would have gotten more opportunities coming up, but they really identified the left-handed side of the plate as a need, and he was somebody who could go. And apparently this Drew Robinson guy is very versatile, plays 5 or 6 positions. His numbers in the majors, which are in very limited at-bats, have not been that great, but apparently in the minors he was really pretty good. We can get into his numbers in the future, but so that was kind of the other, I wouldn't call it a big pickup, but, of note to go Wisdom for Drew Robinson. So the only other player really is that I'm aware of is Francisco Pena. They did let him go and then brought him back on a minor league deal. I'm pretty sure he will make the club and back up Yachty as catcher. There's a chance that he could stay in Memphis and Kisner could get the call up, but I think they want to let Kisner season in Memphis and give it to the job to Francisco Pena. So really that's it so far. We've already had the winter meetings. We're heading into January now. I don't think really that they're going to make a whole lot of moves anymore. They might pick up another bullpen piece or two. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the free agents that are out there, but really earlier in the offseason, even before the Goldschmidt trade, there was talk about who they should go get. Paul Goldschmidt, Mike Moustakas at third. There were a couple outfield options, the big one being Bryce Harper. Bryce Harper, as of this podcast episode, is still a free agent, is still available. A lot of fans would love to go get him. We are going to talk a little bit more about Harper later in the episode. So they haven't lost a whole lot, and they haven't picked up a whole lot. Obviously, the big piece being Paul Goldschmidt, and Andrew Miller being a huge piece. But the team itself is pretty much the same. They are going to make some changes compared to what they started the season and played a lot of the season last year. But really the way they ended the season is going to look pretty similar. There are some decisions to be made, specifically in right field. But even that, I think that decision's already been made. I do believe Dexter Fowler is going to be your starting right fielder. And he's got a lot of ground to make up to get to where he used to be and to get to where some of the other guys on this roster are already at, namely Jose Martinez, Tyler O'Neill, and really a couple other guys that you could plug in out there if Fowler were to struggle. So they don't want him to struggle. They've still got a lot of money owed to him. He is capable of being a good player, but he really didn't show it at all last year. I know there was this talk about depression and his the way he handled his playing time and his performance, and I'm sure there were conflicts with the previous manager. Apparently, it seems like he and Schilt get along. They seem to have a good relationship, so we'll see how that plays out. Speaking of coaching and managing, there's been a lot of changes on the coaching front. So we've brought in Pop Warner and Stubby Clapp, both minor league managers, championship level managers in the minors. Pop Warner's going to be at third. Stubby Clapp's going to be at first. Oliver Marmol has moved to the bench coach position. And Jeff Albert has been brought in as the hitting coach. So most people don't know much about him. I can't say I know much about him, but I believe he's a younger guy. He's been in the Cardinals system before. Apparently, his hitting approach, or his approach to coaching hitting, is something that the team really agrees with. They like what they've seen from him. and they like what he says he's going to try to do with these players. So I'm looking forward to that. I do think the hitting coach has been a position of tension over the last few years with John Mabry. Some of those years, man, this team put up record-setting offensive numbers, and other years, they just looked terrible, inept. And not all of that, if even much of it, is on the hitting coach, but I do think a hitting coach can help guys get out of a slump, can identify holes in their swing, can just talk strategy and approach at the plate. So I definitely think it was time to go in a new direction, and this guy is pretty exciting in Jeff Albert. The assistant hitting coach, Mark Buda, they call him, was brought in at the end of last year, and they retained him as assistant hitting coach. So I kind of thought maybe they would promote him to the main hitting coach. I'm not really sure what was going on there, why they didn't feel the need to promote him, but they did feel the need to retain him as an assistant. Maybe he didn't want to be promoted. I don't really know. But and he had limited exposure, so maybe they just want to see what else he can do. So who knows there. But I do think he helped this team during the coaching change last season. And their offense really picked up, especially that, kind of 1 month run where they went on a tear. So, I think it's good to bring him back, have some continuity, even though we have a new hitting coach. Mike Maddox is back as pitching coach. I think he is a really good pitching coach. It's hard to, I don't think anybody in St. Louis really thinks anybody's a good pitching coach compared to Dave Duncan, but I do think he's got some knowledge, some ability. He seems to be good with the players. I like the way I've seen him treat them. You don't see that much from a pitching coach. He comes out to the mound and puts his hand on their shoulder and says, "Let's go." But I think I like his approach. I think he understands the way the game is changing offensively and with pitching. And I think he's going to continue to bring out a lot from our pitchers. I think we did really well with pitching last year, not necessarily in the bullpen, but our starters. Some of our relievers had amazing seasons too. So I like the fact that Maddox is back. And last but not least, we got Willie McGee continuing in the role of assistant. So assistant coach, assistant manager. He's not really in a role that most teams have. He's just sort of here as a mentor to the players, in a sense, a mentor to some of these coaches and managers. Not that he's got as much experience in managing and coaching, but he's just been around the game a long time. He's been around the Cardinals a long time. So I think he's a valuable piece. The biggest change probably is not having Jose Oquendo back. The secret weapon is gone. He's still with the Cardinals in the minor league system. He'll be down in Florida working with the youngest guys. And that's apparently what he wants to do. He was doing that before Mozeliak asked him to come back. I don't really know if he was released and they didn't want him back, or if he said, "Hey, I'm ready to go back down to Florida." My guess is a little bit of both. They hoped that he would shore up the defense with the major leaguers, and I don't think that really happened all that much. And, maybe that value in having him there isn't as good as they had hoped, and maybe the value of having him with the younger players is better. We'll see. I do think he's a great coach, a great third base coach. I think he could be a great manager, and maybe that's part of what's going on. He's been continued to be looked over by the Cardinals as a manager. So maybe there's some resentment there. I don't know. It's kind of hard to know without being a fly on the wall, but we'll see how that plays out. I do think the idea of having Warner and Clapp up from the minors is a good thing. With this team being as young as they are, they're going to have these managers that they've had experience with and won championships with. Having those guys being out on the field with them can only be a good thing, in my opinion. As long as they aren't waving guys in to be thrown out by 10 feet like some of our previous third base coaches have done, I'll be fine with it. So that's kind of a brief rundown of some of the new players, new coaches, players that are gone. We're going to get into a little bit about predicting the 25-man roster. I don't think there's much to predict. It's going to be pretty straightforward, but Let's go down the positions first. So Yachty's going to be catching. Goldschmidt's going to be at first. I'm fairly certain Wong is going to be at second. DeYoung will be at short. Carpenter will be at third. Ozuna in left. Bader in center. Fowler in right. I don't think there's even that much question about it. If you did want to question, you could say maybe Wong might not be the starter at second or might not be the everyday player. Jerko is going to get some innings. He's a right-handed bat, so he could play on days that, Wong's facing a lefty. And then, of course, same thing with Fowler. Him being a switch hitter does help his chances of playing more, but he was pretty awful from the right side last year, so I wouldn't doubt it if he doesn't see a lot of right-handed at-bats this season, but, it just depends on how he does. But really, those guys are all set in stone. Goldschmidt's going to play at first every day. We're not going to see this rotation like we had last year with Carpenter and Martinez bounce around between first and third and right field and whatever. We're just not going to see that. There might, obviously those guys are going to have days off now and then, but I don't think matchups are going to matter. Carp's going to face everybody. Goldschmidt's going to face everybody from their respective sides. So there's just not a lot of room for movement on the starting positions. On the bench, I think they're going to go with 12 total guys, field players, and 13 pitchers. They might go 13 field players and 12 pitchers, but it's usually the other way around. So if you got 8 on the field starting, you got Jose Martinez on the bench, Tyler O'Neill on the bench, I think. You got to have a backup catcher. That's going to be Francisco Pena. And then they've still got Jed Jerko under contract for several million a year. I believe his contract goes up quite a bit this year. So he's getting $13 million this season. 5 of that's going to be paid by the Padres, but that's quite a bit to have him. He's going to make the team, and he's a solid player. We can get into his numbers in a little bit, but so your bench, if they have 4 bench guys, and I think it's going to be Jose Martinez, Tyler O'Neill, Francisco Pena, and Jed Jerko. Now, some of these guys that we haven't mentioned in those those position players, Jairo Munoz, who played a lot for us last year. He's very versatile. He can play kind of anywhere in the infield, and he can play some outfield. His versatility is definitely going to give him some opportunities, but I really don't see where he's going to go. Now, if Tyler O'Neill falters and they feel like they need to send him back to Memphis for a while, Munoz will probably get the call up. Other than that, there's not a place for him. Now, if they expand the bench to 13 guys, I think Munoz would be the first one called up. Another guy we didn't mention, Adolis Garcia, outfielder, power hitter, very athletic. They like him a lot. But again, there's just nowhere to put him. So if Fowler struggles, if O'Neill struggles, if somebody gets hurt for sure in the outfield, you could see Garcia get the call up. And the other kind of interesting name here is Drew Robinson, the guy we talked about when they traded Patrick Wisdom for this guy. So he is a left-handed utility infielder and outfielder. But where's he going to go? We've already said we've listed all these guys that can play. Now, again, injuries are going to change all of this, but I don't see Drew Robinson making the team out of spring training. We'll see. It's kind of interesting to trade a guy who played some innings for you for another guy who's just going to be sent down to Memphis. But, they want him there to be versatile, and Jerko has had some injury problems, so if he goes down, he's kind of your versatile infielder right now, and they got rid of Greg Garcia. So definitely Robinson could get called up and get some innings. Now, as far as pitchers, as we mentioned, I think they're going to go with 13. So your starting 5 are most likely going to be Carlos Martinez, Jack Flaherty, Miles Michaelis, Michael Wacha, and Adam Wainwright. Now, there definitely could be some changes in there. Martinez ended the season last year as a closer. Part of that was just to limit his innings. He had some injuries last year, shoulder area and that kind of upper back area, but also because they needed a closer and he was being effective. And they had plenty of arms to start games. Now, I don't think they're going to just start him out as a closer this year. They're going to plug him back as a starter, but you never know. If he does show potential to break down or an injury, they might work him back in and have him close, but I do think he's going to start out starting. Flaherty and Michaelis, I think, are obvious. They are going to be our aces probably. And then Waka, if he's healthy, he's going to be a starter for sure. Wainwright's kind of the big the question mark. He will get a chance to start, and depending on his effectiveness, his velocity, how many innings he can go deep into a game, if he can do all that, he will continue to start. But I think there's a strong likelihood he could get moved to the bullpen. If his velocity drops after the first couple innings, or if he can only throw a couple of his pitches effectively, especially if he shows, injury or just he's wearing down, they're not going to expect him to give them, 100 innings or 100 pitches a game. And so I could see them moving him into the bullpen. So that being said, let's look at who's going to be in the bullpen. I think it's going to be Jordan Hicks for sure, Andrew Miller for sure, Brett Cecil for sure, even though most fans would not like to see him out there. He's under contract for a lot of money. He's a left-handed reliever. He's going to be on the team unless he just really falls apart. They would cut ties with him, but I don't think he'll be so bad that they would cut ties with him, and hopefully he bounces back and has a good season. The other guy, Chasen Shreve, I think he falls into that same category as a lefty. He doesn't have the big contract, so they could cut him or send him down to Memphis or whatever and not feel like they're too, obligated to play him. But if he can be effective, even with Andrew Miller, you still got to have those other left-handed arms to go on the days he can't go or to pitch the innings that he can't pitch. So I think Shreve will be part of that bullpen. You still got Luke Gregerson. We didn't get to see much from him. He was injured a lot of last year, but he's still under contract for a decent amount. He's been an effective reliever in the past, so I do think they're going to keep him around. He could be a candidate to just get DFA'd, but I don't expect it. With his contract and his history, I think as long as he's healthy, he should be relatively effective, and he'll be a decent arm in the pen. Dominic Leone is another power arm that they have control over, and I believe he'll be here as long as he's healthy. Brebbia is kind of the last. I'm pretty sure he'll make the team as a reliever. He had a nice, effective postseason, so to speak, over in, where were they? Was it Japan that him and Yachty went and pitched or played? I think. Anyway, Brebbia was a very effective reliever for us. He throws pretty hard. He's got good stuff. I think, he could definitely be back and forth between Memphis, but I forget what his options are, but I think he'll make the club in the bullpen. And then the last piece that I feel like will probably be in the bullpen is Alex Reyes. There's a chance he could just start in Memphis, and they condition him to be a starter down there and come up when the first guy gets injured. And there's actually a chance he could be in the rotation out of spring, but I don't expect it with the other 5 starters. I just think he's going to be a reliever. He might be the closer. He might be a setup man. We'll see. So I've got him penciled in as the last of the 8 relievers. But there's some good names that we haven't discussed. So Ponce de Leon, Hudson, Gomber, Gant, Myers, all those guys pitched very good innings for us, effective innings and pressure situations. Some of those guys started. Gant and Gomber started. Hudson might have started one in there. Ponce de Leon had a couple starts. But those guys are all good, young, effective arms. But is there a place for them? There definitely would be a place for them if you didn't have the Brett Cecil contract or the Gregerson contract. And they'll get their chance as guys get injured, or as, say, if Waino's ineffective and Reyes slots in to be a starter, you're going to need another reliever if that's not Waino. So we'll see. But that's a good problem to have. You got a lot of arms that can all be effective for you, whether it's starting or relieving or both. I think there's multiple closer candidates. I don't like it that we don't have that closer role nailed down. I think it's always better to have a closer designated going into the season, going into spring. I think it's good to have that. They'll figure it out. I think it's probably going to be Jordan Hicks, but it could be Andrew Miller maybe in a multi-inning role. It could be Gregerson. It could be Reyes, Leon. I mean, really any of those guys. But Hicks is the only one throwing 105. So with crazy movement. So he's the guy for the future, and maybe the future is now. We'll see. So along these lines, we just went through who I think will be on the 25-man roster. Predicting the starting lineup, I also think is fairly obvious, but also there could be some wiggle room in there. Carp's gonna lead off. I think I could see Ozuna batting second, Goldschmidt third, DeYoung cleanup. So your first four: Carp, Ozuna, Goldschmidt, DeYoung. I think that's a heck of a top four of your lineup. You got pop from all four of those positions. You got on base percentage with Carpenter, and really Ozuna and Goldschmidt, when they're doing what they do, they get on base too. And DeYoung hits for plenty of power. So, but you could shift that around. Maybe Goldschmidt will bat second and Ozuna third. You might even have Yachty batting fourth. I don't think so, but you never know. I've got Yachty fifth right now, Fowler sixth, Bader seventh, and Wong eighth. So for Fowler to be batting sixth or to be on the field at all, he's going to have to be healthy and out of whatever funk he had going last year. So if that's the case, I do think he'll be sixth, but he could even bat second if he's right. Now you start looking at lefty-righty matchups. The way this lineup that I've just mentioned is you got Carp batting left and then a lot of right-handers. Ozuna, Goldschmidt, DeYoung, Yachty, all right-handed. Then Fowler back to left side, usually. Bader right, Wong left pitcher. So at the end of that order, you do have that left, right. But earlier in the lineup, it's pretty right-handed heavy. So it would be nice to get another left-handed bat in the middle there. But, whatever. If the guys are effective, they're effective. It doesn't matter to me which side they hit from, within reason. We all know matchups matter, but I hate to just keep using that necessarily. You go with production versus matchups. But so that's kind of what we were looking at for the 25-man roster and who's going to start and where they're going to play. Like I said before, I don't think there's a lot of holes there. There's nothing obvious that they have to replace. They've got guys in place who either played for them last year or they picked up and where they're going to be. There's nobody that's just gone and we say, oh man, we don't have a third baseman. Who's going to play third? Unfortunately, in my opinion, Carp is our starting third baseman. I don't believe he should be a major league third baseman. He doesn't have the arm for it. Now, some of these defensive metrics indicate that he's actually a solid third baseman. I question some of those defensive metrics, and we'll talk about that probably in a future episode. But he put up some pretty good numbers last year. Some of that was his positioning on the field, where he played. Supposedly, they're going to have him playing off the line a little more than he used to, kind of covering that ground between third and short. That can only help, I guess. To me, it's his arm, his throwing arm. I don't know what's going on. I know he's had an injury, but it seems like he's been this way for years. So he just throws weird and throws bad. It comes out of his hand high, and so he has, in my opinion, he's very susceptible to overthrowing it into the stands, or into the foul territory. So I just don't like to see that. You don't see him go pick a ball on the line deep in the grass and fire it over to first. He just doesn't have the arm for that. And to me, that's what a third baseman has to be able to do. You have to be able to rely on that throw, rely on that glove. And I just don't like him over there. But that's where he needs to play. The only other place he really could play is second base. And I don't think they're going to get rid of Wong's defense to put Carpenter over there, unless they would sign some Gold Glove caliber third baseman or trade for him. I don't see them moving Carpenter anywhere. So, it is what it is. Is it going to burn us this year? I doubt it. I don't think he's going to have like a terrible defensive season. I just prefer when we have Gold Glove caliber defenders. But, you can't have that every year at every position. So The big question that everybody has as far as available players is Bryce Harper. So we touched on that earlier. Is Bryce Harper a fit on this team? Is it a possibility at all? And if it is, should they try to do it? I'm definitely in the camp, the pro Harper camp. Now, I'll preface that with, I do think he has some issues. I don't think he is this for sure best player in the game. We should sign him for 10 years, $350 million. I don't necessarily think that, but I do value his ability, his statistics, and his age. So I do think he's the guy they should go after. And I'll talk about his numbers a little bit here. So let's compare a little bit of Bryce Harper's numbers to what we've already got, some of the guys on this team. Kind of the gold standard for us last year was Matt Carpenter offensively. So his total WAR, wins above replacement, was 4.9. I don't necessarily like WAR for several reasons, and actually in a future episode, maybe our next episode or in a couple episodes, I'm going to have one all about WAR and why I don't like it, but why I also appreciate it. So, but anyway, right now that's a stat that most people use for value of a player, and his WAR is 4.9. A nearly 5 WAR is really good. I mean, there are guys that put up more than that, but that's an incredible season, an incredible player for 4.9. How did he get there? He had an 897 OPS with a 374 on base percentage and a 523 slugging percentage. 374 on base is really good. To me, anything, above 350 or so is really good. So 374 is great. And so he's getting on base with walks and hits, and he's hitting enough home runs and doubles to keep his slugging percentage way up there, way over 500. So, that he's kind of our best player offensively. Now, we've got Goldschmidt, who is actually even better by quite a bit in some ways. So Goldschmidt where Carpenter had an 897, almost a 900 OPS. Goldschmidt has a 922 OPS with a 533 slugging percentage and 389 on base. I mean, that's just crazy good. And his WAR was 5.4. So, and actually, even though, we talk about him being a Gold Glove caliber defender, his defense was actually a negative 0.4. So not, his defensive WAR was a negative 0.4. Not a huge negative number, but anything negative is not great. But, he's still a Gold Glove caliber defender. Really good. He's going to improve our first base defense quite a bit. And obviously, he's putting up crazy numbers. He had 33 home runs last year compared to Carp's 36. He had 83 RBI compared to Carp's 81. He scored 95 runs. He had 172 hits compared to Carp's 145 in nearly the same number of games. So he's going to be a huge upgrade to this team. Now, that being said, Carp and Goldschmidt are two best players. How does Harper compare? So we said Carp had an 897 OPS. Harper had an 889 OPS. So just a little bit under Carpenter. But he did it with a 496, almost 500 slugging percentage, and a 393 on base percentage. So Carp is at 374 on base, which is really good. Goldschmidt at 389, really good. And Harper even higher at 393. So he's getting on base. His batting average isn't as high as some of these guys, but he's taking walks. He's getting his hits. He's doing what you need to do, which is get on base, and he's slugging almost 500. So he's hitting for power. He had 34 home runs last year. He had 100 RBI. I didn't write down his doubles, but I think he had 34 doubles. He played a whole season, 159 games, 137 hits. So his hits, like I said, his average wasn't as good as some of these other guys, but he's making up for that with power and walks. Now, here's where we get into the question on his WAR. So his WAR value, again, Carp was 4.9, Goldschmidt's 5.4. Harper's was 1.3. So the big difference there is his defensive WAR was negative 3.2. More than a negative 3 WAR is a big deal. That's a lot to do wrong defensively to get down to that. His offensive WAR was 4.2, so he offsets it, but he ends up being only a 1.3 WAR. I could really question the defensive WAR statistic. I can't say I watched Harper every day, obviously, but I never saw anything that made me think, oh my God, this guy's just terrible in the outfield. To have that bad of a defensive statistic. I mean, we thought Jose Martinez was terrible in right field, right? He just looks like he's just totally not athletic. Nobody wants him in right field. That's why they stuck him at first. And he doesn't really play well there either. Jose Martinez was a negative 2.1 WAR, and Harper was a negative 3.2. So I don't see that. That doesn't pass the eye test for me. Now, that was by far his worst defensive season. On average, he doesn't come anywhere close to that. He's much closer to a wash defensively, about a 0. He's had some positive seasons. He's had some negative seasons. So I think that's a fluke. I don't think he's going to have another negative 3 defensive WAR season. I don't think he's going to come anywhere close to that, which is going to put his value way up there again. If he can get even close to 0 or even a positive defensive WAR, you're talking about a guy whose total WAR rating is right up there with Goldschmidt. So, does a guy like that fit? Well, yeah, he's a left-handed power hitting bat. We need a left-handed hitter. Now, if he replaces somebody, he's probably going to replace Fowler, who mostly bats left-handed. So it's in that sense, you're not replacing a righty for a lefty, but you're replacing way worse production in Fowler and getting way better production in Harper. So he's a left-handed young bat. He's 26. He's proven himself for years now. He's had an MVP season. He's had MVP type numbers. Now we could go through all of his numbers, and maybe we will in the future break him down a little bit more. But that's the other issue, is that he has had some seasons where he's not all that great. He doesn't put up 30 something home runs. He's only had one season of 100 RBI with some pretty solid hitters around him in the lineup in Washington. He's had some issues with on-base percentage, though usually he's really good at that. But year in and year out, he's been a little inconsistent. And the other thing is he's been injury prone. He's had a lot of different kinds of injuries. And so even though he's young, you could argue that maybe he's a little worn down for his age. You can't necessarily count on him for a full season, though he did play 159 games last year. So I can see the reservation with him, or I guess the reservation with maybe giving him that kind of money that's been discussed. And I don't think the Cardinals will do that. I don't think they're going to give 10 years, $350 million or $400 million or whatever. But if the market does fall back a little bit, and I don't think it would have to fall back much, but if it did, I could see them getting into the Bryce Harper talks. Now, the other issue with that is some of these other teams have made it clear they want to go after him. Specifically, the Phillies have said, what did he say? The owner said he's wants to spend stupid money, or we've got money to spend and we're going to be stupid about it, or something like that. They've made it clear they want to get Harper. They've already had him in for interviews. The Dodgers made a huge trade recently with the Reds. They unloaded 2 of their outfielders. One was a starter and one was a fourth outfielder. So they got rid of Puig and Kemp, made room to sign a power hitting outfielder. And they've made it pretty clear that they want that to be Bryce Harper. So and obviously the Yankees have interviewed him. I think the White Sox have interviewed him. And there's other teams who, especially if the market falls back for him, would get interested, like the Cardinals would. So I don't think it's all that likely that he's going to sign here. I do think he would want to sign here, as far as, some of these guys that maybe have made it clear they don't necessarily want to go to St. Louis. I think Harper does appreciate the history of the Cardinals franchise and the success that they've had. Does that mean he wants to live in the city? I don't know. Who knows? The right contract would get it done. But I do think he would want to play here. So I think he's a good fit. There's some people that don't have any interest in getting Harper because of his defense and base running and perceived attitude problems. I don't really perceive that. I think he's a fiery player and he might point a finger in your chest, but I appreciate that as long as he's not being a jerk about it. And I don't really think he is. As long as he's pulling his weight and, putting his effort level in, I don't care if he calls out a player who's not. And to me, that's really what he's done as far as attitude problems. And that, to me, that's not an attitude problem. But, you could say maybe he's a cancer in the locker room type of player. I don't see it that way, but some people do perceive that. And when you combine that with his perceived lack of defense and potential, base running issues, I don't think there's a whole lot with his base running, but some people think there is. So you put all that together and you say, is this guy worthy of the biggest contract in the history of the game? Probably not. Is he still going to get it because some team's going to want him? Probably. So that probably puts him out of the Cardinals' reach, but we'll see. I think he'd be a good fit. Do I think he's going to wind up here? Probably not. So that's kind of the state of the Cardinals. The only other thing I really wanted to get into was Mike Shildt, the relatively new manager. He will be heading into his first full season. He took over, obviously, for Mike Matheny last year, and in his record was 41-28 in games managed. That is just over 59% winning percentage in 2018. So if you extrapolate that out for a full season, that comes out to 96 wins. So as we mentioned, the Milwaukee won the division last year with 96 wins. So if the Cardinals could do 96, they would definitely put them in the running for winning the division. Now, do I think they're going to do that? I don't know. That's a tall task. They went on an amazing tear in that 1 month stretch where they just were, unbelievable. And then they kind of faltered off a little bit later in the season. But so I don't think they're necessarily going to go on that kind of a tear season long, right? But that being said, they did kind of even it out later and ended up with a 59% win percentage. So is it unreasonable to think they could do that again? No. And they've added a couple key pieces in Goldschmidt and Miller. So maybe they're going to be even more likely to go on a tear. You're going to get a full season of stellar defense in center field from Harrison Bader. You're going to get a full season of stellar defense from Goldschmidt at first. You're going to get, hopefully, a better season from Dexter Fowler. But if not, I believe they've got some good pieces in place like Tyler O'Neill, who put up crazy good numbers in Memphis last year. He was the Memphis Player of the Year. And in his short, limited at-bats in the majors, he had 9 home runs of his 33 hits. So, more than 25% of his hits were home runs. That's great. So there's a lot of reason for optimism with this team heading into 2019. So do I like what I've seen from Shildt? Absolutely. I was very fed up with Matheny. I wanted him fired before 2018 season even started. I was talking about having him fired in the middle of 2017. I think Shildt has the respect of these players. I think he is a baseball guy, a manager. Matheny was still learning to be a manager. Of course, he's a baseball guy. He's a Gold Glove catcher, played the game for many years, well respected. I think Matheny's a great guy. I don't think he's a great manager. I think he was handed the keys to a World Series caliber team in 2012 and did very well with what he had. But even during those great seasons, 2012, 2013, 2014, I think I was definitely saying I think he cost them some games. I think he cost them some playoff series with his decisions. So as good as he did, he put, I forget what the stats were, but he was, the first manager ever to go to the playoffs in his first 5 seasons or something like that, whatever it was. And, he seemed like this great manager, but I just don't think he was. I think he was overmatched too many times. He made bad decisions with the bullpen too many times. He didn't handle players the right way and caused some of this strife and some of these slumps. Sometimes you got to know how to get a guy out of a hitting slump and when to give him a break, when to keep with him, to give him confidence, and when not to. And I don't think Matheny understands that. He just hasn't been doing it long enough. And even though Schilt hasn't been doing it in the majors, he's been managing a long time and has been around the game, around the major league level since he was a kid with Baltimore. And I just think he's the right kind of guy to manage a baseball team. He's what you need. He understands strategy. He understands the evolution of the game, where it's going. He just, I don't know. I mean, it's been limited, so I can't say for sure, obviously. But I like what I've seen from Schilt. I think he's going to do very well. And even if he gets us 3 or 4 wins that maybe another guy like Matheny would have cost us in decision making, those 3 or 4 wins are the difference in making the playoffs and missing out again. So I think it could be a very good season with Schilt. I think 96 is maybe stretching it. I do think they're going to be in the 90s, probably somewhere around 92, 93, 94 wins. We can get into kind of how we get to those numbers with pitchers and their win totals and players and their WAR values and things like that. But no, I do think they're going to take a step forward from 88. Maybe they're going to get to that 95, 96, 98, who knows, wins. I don't think Chicago is going to be quite as good as they were. And Milwaukee, I think, is going to continue to be competitive. Maybe a couple of those wins that we pick up will be against a team like Milwaukee and give them a couple extra losses. So I think it's going to be a fun, competitive season. I'm not convinced that Cincinnati has done enough with their pitching to really step up. And Pittsburgh was only a few games behind us, but they haven't really done a whole lot either with their roster to kind of improve. They still could, but so I do think it's going to be a 3-team race with Milwaukee, Chicago, and St. Louis, but I think the whole division is going to be fun to watch, especially now we're going to have to see Puig a lot more often with Cincinnati. They've improved their offense quite a bit. So we'll see. But that is the state of the Cardinals at the end of 2018, heading into the 2019 season. We've still got the winter warm-up and spring training to look forward to. They'll probably make some moves, and when they do, I'll definitely talk about them here on the podcast. Some of the things we're going to talk about coming up, I think the next episode is going to be analyzing the Goldschmidt trade, talk about what they gave up to get him, what his numbers have looked like over the last few seasons. Is he on a downward trend? Maybe. What's it going to take to keep him around as far as a contract? And what would be a bad contract? What would be a bad decision to keep him, and what would be a good decision? So we're really going to break down a lot about Paul Goldschmidt on the next episode. And moving forward from that, we'll probably talk about Andrew Miller, and we'll have an episode all about WAR. I want to have an episode all about, is there such a thing as clutch? I think there is. I've talked to several people who think there isn't. We'll have to define clutch. So I've got a whole bunch of things that we're going to talk about in the upcoming episodes of the BFIBs Almanac. Get a hold of us on social media and Twitter and Instagram and email and all that. We'll get all that set up and sent out. I want to hear from our listeners, and I want to know what you think I'm full of it on. I want to know what you agree with me on. Give me some ideas about what you'd like to dive into. And we're just going to have fun talking St. Louis Cardinals. So until next time, I'm Jared, and this is the BFIBs Almanac.